Climate. Shanghai has a humid subtropical climate, with an average annual temperature of 15.8 degrees Celsius for urban districts and 15.2 to 15 degrees Celsius for suburbs. The city experiences 4 distinct seasons. Winters are temperate to cold and damp. Northwesterly winds from Siberia can cause nighttime temperatures to drop below freezing. Each year, there are an average of 6.2 days with snowfall and 2.8 days with snow cover. Summers are hot and humid, and occasional downpours or freak thunderstorms can be expected. On average, 8.7 days exceed 35 degrees Celsius annually. In summer and the beginning of autumn, the city is susceptible to typhoons. The most pleasant seasons are generally spring, although changeable and often rainy, and autumn, which is usually sunny and dry. With monthly % possible sunshine ranging from 34% in March to 54% in August, the city receives 1,895 hours of bright sunshine annually. Extremes since 1951 have ranged from 10.1 degrees Celsius on the 31st of January, 1977, to 40.9 degrees Celsius on the 21st of July, 2017, at a weather station in Zhujiahu. Religion. Due to its cosmopolitan history, Shanghai has a blend of religious heritage. Religious buildings and institutions are scattered around the city. According to a 2012 survey, only 13.1% of the city's population belongs to organized religions, including Buddhists with 10.4%, Protestants with 1%, Catholics with 0.7%, and other faiths with 0.1%, while the remaining 86% of the population could be either atheists or involved in worship of natural deities and ancestors or folk religious sects. Religion in Shanghai. Buddhism, in its Chinese varieties, has had a presence in Shanghai since the Three Kingdoms period, during which the Longhua Temple, the largest temple in Shanghai, and the Jinggan Temple were founded. Another significant temple is the Jade Buddha Temple, which was named after a large statue of Buddha carved out of jade in the temple. As of 2014, Buddhism in Shanghai had 114 temples, 1,182 clerical staff, and 453,300 registered followers. The religion also has its own college, the Shanghai Buddhist College, and its own press, Shanghai Buddhological Press. Catholicism was brought into Shanghai in 1608 by Italian missionary Lazzaro Catania. The Apostolic Vicariate of Shanghai was erected in 1933, and was further elevated to the Diocese of Shanghai in 1946. Notable Catholic sites include the St. Ignatius Cathedral in Zhujiahu, the largest Catholic church in the city, the St. Francis Xavier Church, and the Shishan Basilica. Other forms of Christianity in Shanghai include Eastern Orthodox minorities and, since 1996, registered Christian Protestant churches. Although currently making up a fraction of the religious population in Shanghai, Jewish people have played an influential role in the city's history. After the Treaty of Nanking ended the First Opium War in 1842, the city was opened up to Western populations and merchants traveled to Shanghai for its rich business potential, including many prominent Jewish families. The Sassoons amassed great wealth in the opium and textile trades, cementing their status by funding many of the buildings that have become iconic in Shanghai's skyline, such as the Cathay Hotel in 1929. The Haduns were another prominent Baghdadi Jewish family that used their business success to define Shanghai in the 20th century. The head of the family, Silas Hadun, one of the richest people in the world during the 1800s, financed Nanjing Road, which then housed departmental stores in the international settlement. That is now one of the busiest shopping centers in the world. During World War II, thousands of Jews emigrated to Shanghai in an effort to flee Nazi Germany. They lived in a designated area called the Shanghai Ghetto and formed a community centered on the Ohel Moish Synagogue, which is now the Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum. In 1939, Horace Kaderi, the head of the powerful philanthropic Sephardic Jewish family in Shanghai, founded the Shanghai Jewish Youth Association to support Jewish refugees through English education so they would be prepared to emigrate from Shanghai when the time came. Islam religion came into Shanghai during the Yuan dynasty. The city's first mosque, Songjiang Mosque, was built during the Xizheng era under Emperor Huzong. Shanghai's Muslim population increased in the 19th and early 20th centuries. during which time many mosques, including the Xiaotaoyuan Mosque, the Huxi Mosque, and the Pudong Mosque, were built. The Shanghai Islamic Association is located in the Xiaotaoyuan Mosque in Huangpu. Shanghai has several folk religious temples, including the city god temple at the heart of the old city, the Daijingje Pavilion dedicated to the Three Kingdoms General Guanyu, the Confucian Temple of Shanghai, and a major Taoist center Shanghai White Cloud Temple where the Shanghai Taoist Association locates. Railway. Shanghai has 4 major railway stations: Shanghai Railway Station, Shanghai South Railway Station, Shanghai West Railway Station, and Shanghai Hongqiao Railway Station. All are connected to the metro network and serve as hubs in the railway network of China. And now Shanghai has around 20 railway lines running under this city, which largely facilitate people's life in Shanghai. Built in 1876, the Wusong Railway was the first railway in Shanghai and the first railway in operation in China by 1909. Shanghai Nanjing Railway and Shanghai Hangzhou Railway were in service. As of October 2019, the 2 railways have been integrated into 2 main railways in China, Beijing-Shanghai Railway and Shanghai Kunming Railway, respectively. Shanghai has 4 high-speed railways: Beijing-Shanghai HSR, Shanghai Nanjing Intercity Railway, Shanghai Kunming HSR, and Shanghai Nantong Railway. 1 HSR is under construction, Shanghai Suzhou-Huzhou HSR. Shanghai also has 4 commuter railways: Pudong Railway and Jinshan Railway operated by China Railway, and Line 16 and Line 17 operated by Shanghai Metro. As of January 2022, 4 additional lines, Chongming Line, Jiamen Line, Airport Link Line and Lianggang Express Line, are under construction. Economy. Shanghai has been described as the showpiece of the booming economy of China. The city is a global center for finance and innovation, and a national center for commerce, trade, and transportation, with the world's busiest container port, the Port of Shanghai. As of 2019, Shanghai had a GDP of 3.82 trillion that makes up 3.85% of China's GDP, and a GDP per capita of 157,138. As of 2018, the Greater Shanghai Metropolitan Area, which includes Suzhou, Wuxi, Nantong, Ningbo, Jiaxing, Zhoushan, and Huzhou, was estimated to produce a gross metropolitan product of nearly 9.1 trillion RMB. As of 2020, the economy of Shanghai was estimated to be $1 trillion, ranking the most productive metro area of China and among the top 10 largest metropolitan economies in the world. Shanghai's 6 largest industries, retail, finance, IT, real estate, machine manufacturing, and automotive manufacturing, comprise about half the city's GDP. In 2021, the average annual disposable income of Shanghai's residents was 78,027 per capita, making it one of the wealthiest cities in China, but also the most expensive city in mainland China to live in according to a 2017 study by the Economist Intelligence Unit. In 2021, Shanghai is the most expensive city in the world. Shanghai is the 5th wealthiest city in the world, with a total wealth amounts to $1.8 trillion, and Shanghai is ranked 5th highest in the number of billionaires by Forbes. Shanghai's nominal GDP is projected to reach $1.3 trillion in 2035, making it one of the world's top 5 major cities in terms of GRP according to a study by Oxford Economics. Shanghai was the largest and most prosperous city in East Asia during the 1930s, and its rapid redevelopment began in the 1990s. In the last 2 decades, Shanghai has been one of the fastest developing cities in the world. It has recorded double-digit GDP growth in almost every year between 1992 and 2008, before the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. History. Xia Kingdom, Shang Kingdom, Zhou Kingdom, Kingdom of Shu, State of Bao, State of Wu, Spring and Autumn period divided in warring states, Qin Empire, Kingdom of Nanai, Dayan Kingdom divided in 3 kingdoms, Great Yuan Empire, Great Ming Empire, Great Qing Empire, Shanghai International Settlement, Republic of China reorganized, National Government of the Republic of China, Republic of China, People's Republic of China. Antiquity. The western part of modern-day Shanghai was inhabited 6,000 years ago. During the Spring and Autumn period, it belonged to the Kingdom of Wu, which was conquered by the Kingdom of Yu, which in turn was conquered by the Kingdom of Chu. During the Warring States period, Shanghai was part of the fief of Lord Chunshan of Chu, one of the four lords of the Warring States. He ordered the excavation of the Huangpu River. Its former or poetic name, the Chunshan River, gave Shanghai its nickname of Shen. Fishermen living in the Shanghai area then created a fish tool called the Cha, which lent its name to the outlet of Suzhou Creek north of the Old City and became a common nickname and abbreviation for the city. Imperialism. During the Tang and Song dynasties, Qinglong Town in modern Qingpu district was a major trading port. Established in 746, it developed into what historically called a giant town of the southeast, with 13 temples and 7 pagodas. Mi Fu, a scholar and artist of the Song dynasty, served as its mayor. The port experienced thriving trade with provinces along the Yangtze and the Chinese coast, as well as with foreign countries such as Japan and Silla. By the end of the Song dynasty, the center of trading had moved downstream of the Wusong River to Shanghai. It was upgraded in status from a village to a market town in 1074, and in 1172, a second sea wall was built to stabilize the ocean coastline, supplementing an earlier dike. From the Yuan dynasty in 1292 until Shanghai officially became a municipality in 1927, central Shanghai was administered as a county under Songjiang Prefecture, which had its seat in the present-day Songjiang district. Two important events helped promote Shanghai's developments in the Ming dynasty. A city wall was built for the first time in 1554 to protect the town from raids by Japanese pirates. It measured 10 meters high and 5 kilometers in circumference. A city god temple was built in 1602 during the Wanli reign. This honor was usually reserved for prefectural capitals and not normally given to a mere county seat such as Shanghai. Scholars have theorized that this likely reflected the town's economic importance, as opposed to its low political status. During the Qing dynasty, Shanghai became one of the most important seaports in the Yangtze Delta region as a result of two important central government policy changes. In 1684, the Kangxi Emperor reversed the Ming dynasty prohibition on ocean-going vessels, a ban that had been in force since 1525, and in 1732, the Qianlong Emperor moved the customs office for Jiangsu province from the prefectural capital of Songjiang to Shanghai, and gave Shanghai exclusive control over customs collections for Jiangsu's foreign trade. As a result of these two critical decisions, Shanghai became the major trade port for all of the lower Yangtze region by 1735, despite still being at the lowest administrative level in the political hierarchy. Rise and Golden Age. In the 19th century, international attention to Shanghai grew due to European recognition of its economic and trade potential at the Yangtze. During the First Opium War, British forces occupied the city. The war ended in 1842 with the Treaty of Nanking, which opened Shanghai as one of the 5 treaty ports for international trade. The Treaty of the Bog, the Treaty of Wanghia, and the Treaty of Whampoa forced Chinese concession to European and American desires for visitation and trade on Chinese soil. Britain, France, and the United States all established a presence outside the walled city of Shanghai, which remained under the direct administration of the Chinese. The Chinese-held Old City of Shanghai fell to rebels from the Small Swords Society in 1853, but was recovered by the Qing government in February, 1855. In 1854, the Shanghai Municipal Council was created to manage the foreign settlements. Between 1860 and 1862, the Taiping rebels twice attacked Shanghai and destroyed the city's eastern and southern suburbs, but failed to take the city. In 1863, the British settlement to the south of Suzhou Creek and the American settlement to the north joined in order to form the Shanghai International Settlement. The French opted out of the Shanghai Municipal Council and maintained its own concession to the south and southwest. The First Sino-Japanese War concluded with the 1895 Treaty of Shimonoseki, which elevated Japan to become another foreign power in Shanghai. Japan built the first factories in Shanghai, which was soon copied by other foreign powers. All this international activity gave Shanghai the nickname the Great Athens of China. In 1914, the old city walls were dismantled because they blocked the city's expansion. In July, 1921, the Chinese Communist Party was founded in the French concession. On the 30th of May, 1925, the May 30th movement broke out when a worker in a Japanese-owned cotton mill was shot and killed by a Japanese foreman. Workers in the city then launched general strikes against imperialism, which became nationwide protests that gave rise to Chinese nationalism. The Golden Age of Shanghai began with its elevation to municipality after it was separated from Jiangsu on the 7th of July, 1927. This new Chinese municipality covered an area of 494.69 kilometers squared, including the modern-day districts of Baoshan, Yangpu, Zhabui, Nanxi, and Pudong, but excluded the foreign concessions territories. Headed by a Chinese mayor and municipal council, the new city government's first task, the Greater Shanghai Plan, was to create a new city center in Jiangwan town of Yangpu district, outside the boundaries of the foreign concessions. The plan included a public museum, library, sports stadium, and city hall, which were partially constructed before being interrupted by the Japanese invasion. The city flourished, becoming a primary commercial and financial hub of the Asia-Pacific region in the 1930s. During the ensuing decades, citizens of many countries and all continents came to Shanghai to live and work. Those who stayed for long periods, some for generations, called themselves Shanghailanders. In the 1920s and 1930s, almost 20,000 white Russians fled the newly established Soviet Union to reside in Shanghai. These Shanghai Russians constituted the second largest foreign community. By 1932, Shanghai had become the world's fifth largest city and home to 70,000 foreigners. In the 1930s, some 30,000 Jewish refugees from Europe arrived in the city. Skyline of Shanghai Pudong at night, September, 2021. Shanghai filmed in 1937. The Bund in the late 1920s seen from the French concession. Nanking Road in the 1930s. Shanghai Park Hotel was the tallest building in Asia for decades. Former Shanghai Library. The HSBC building built in 1923 and the Customs House built in 1927. Japanese invasion. On the 28th of January, 1932, Japanese forces invaded Shanghai while the Chinese resisted. More than 10,000 shops and hundreds of factories and public buildings were destroyed, leaving Zhabui district ruined. About 18,000 civilians were either killed, injured, or declared missing. A ceasefire was brokered on the 5th of May. In 1937, the Battle of Shanghai resulted in the occupation of the Chinese-administered parts of Shanghai outside of the international settlement and the French concession. People who stayed in the occupied city suffered on a daily basis, experiencing hunger, oppression, or death. The foreign concessions were ultimately occupied by the Japanese on the 8th of December, 1941, and remained occupied until Japan's surrender in 1945. Multiple war crimes were committed during that time. A side effect of the Japanese invasion of Shanghai was the Shanghai Ghetto. Japanese consul to Kaunas, Lithuania, Chiun Sugihara issued thousands of visas to Jewish refugees who were escaping the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish question. They traveled from Kiev, Lithuania across Russia by railroad to the Vladivostok, from where they traveled by ship to Kobe, Japan. Their stay in Kobe was short as the Japanese government transferred them to Shanghai by November, 1941. Other Jewish refugees found haven in Shanghai, not through Sugihara, but came on ships from Italy. The refugees from Europe were interned into a cramped ghetto in the Hongkou district, and after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, even the Iraqi Jews who had been living in Shanghai from before the outbreak of World War II were interned. Among the refugees in the Shanghai Ghetto was the Mirror Yeshiva, including its students and faculty. On the 3rd of September, 1945, the Chinese army liberated the ghetto and most of the Jews left over the next few years. By 1957, there were only 100 Jews remaining in Shanghai. On the 27th of May, 1949, the People's Liberation Army took control of Shanghai through the Shanghai Campaign. Under the new People's Republic of China, Shanghai was one of only 3 municipalities not merged into neighboring provinces. Most foreign firms moved their offices from Shanghai to Hong Kong, as part of a foreign divestment due to the PRC's victory. Modernity. After the war, Shanghai's economy was restored. From 1949 to 1952, the city's agricultural and industrial output increased by 51.5% and 94.2%, respectively. There were 20 urban districts and 10 suburbs at the time.